Welcome. It's great to have you here. Jonathan Foust here. Nice to have you here for this meditation and interview tonight. I'll tell you all about that. First of all, some thank yous. Thank you to our producers, to Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo for making this possible, to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for all they do in hosting this as well, and to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington in Arlington, Virginia, which has been the physical host of Monday night. At least it was. We'll see. Also, a big thank you to our mindful movement and mindful dialogue leaders. If you would like to participate in the whole Monday night event at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can join a mindful movement class led by one of three wonderful teachers. This starts at 7:30. We end at 8:45, and afterward, around 8:50, if you like, you can join Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy for a time of discussion about your practice, about the talk, time to kind of come together and hear from like-minded people and to share as well. Please help yourself to that. Also, just to let you know that none of us are offered any compensation for our offering, so if you are so drawn to support this to help ensure that no one's denied access to these practices and these teachings in this community, your support is gratefully received. So I thank you for that. One final thing, if you are interested, I have a monthly newsletter as well as a weekly newsletter. But in the monthly newsletter, I share a compendium of the talks as well as my best photography for the month. So feel free to check that out on my website. And as well, those links for mindful dialogue and mindful movement are also on my Facebook page and on my website. So, thanks. A little bit about the interview. This is part of the Conversations with Depth Practitioners series, where I have conversations with depth practitioners. You might be wondering, why does no one in the Dharma world talk about sex? Well, tonight's your night. Rachel Krantz is an investigative journalist. She's one of the founding editors of Bustle. She was a senior features editor for 3 years. She's been featured on NPR, The Guardian, Vox, Vice, other outlets. She's a recipient of Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award, the Investigative Reporters and Editors Radio Award, the Edward R. Murrow Award, and the Peabody Award. So she has taken this investigative journalist approach to exploring, and this is the title of her book. It's called Open: Love, Liberation, and Non-Monogamy. This is a very clear, a very brutally honest, a very graphic exploration of what it's like to be in an open marriage. We'll be talking about some of the pitfalls that occur in open relationships, and as well the practices that have helped her in her personal exploration. I did ask her as well some advice for those who are exploring relationships and in what are really kind of more open and more fluid times. I think you'll find this interview fascinating. I hope you enjoy it. Rachel is an extraordinary practitioner and extraordinarily articulate and extraordinarily honest in her exploration of what it means to be in relationship. So enjoy the meditation and enjoy the interview. I'm really glad you're here. For this session, I was thinking we might do a classical practice. First starting with kind of arriving and softening inside. So much of this first stage of meditation is about present moment awareness. It's about gathering attention, but it's also about receptivity. And you can receive through relaxation and through softening. I'll then offer a little bit of guidance around this practice of non-judging awareness, of mindfulness, where you might expand beyond your anchor or your focal point to open to a sense of what's changing. And here, of course, you can observe not only what's happening, but you can begin to examine the attitude in your mind. At the end, we'll have some time to explore what it's like just to simply be, just to rest in presence. So, with that, let's start in with our meditation. You might want to reach your arms up overhead. Take some time to move, stretch, let out any sounds. You're on mute, so you can bellow, screech, shout, mutter, whatever you like. It's always helpful to make sure that you're not going to be disturbed. As you're ready, if you like, you can close your eyes. And you might take a moment just to reflect on your intention. What has called you here for this time of practice? And you might just sense for a moment just completing the following phrase, either spontaneously or making up the words that feel right for you. For this meditation, I am here to... And again, if no words happen, just find the words that resonate for you now. It may be that you're here to relax. You're here to pay attention. Or you're here to explore what it means to practice self-observation without judgment. Perhaps you're here just simply to rest and be. Or perhaps you're here to discover your intention as you practice. You may find it helpful now to turn your attention to your breath and gently lengthen the in-breath to the count of 4 or 5. And then glide right into the exhalation to again 4 or 5. And for this next little bit, let your breath be consciously slow and smooth and deep. You may find it helpful to match the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath, and as you do so, just notice the effect on the mind. You might sense as well, on the exhalation, could you soften a little bit more on the inside? And over the next, let's say, 2 or 3 breaths, how intimately can you feel the breath on the inside right now? And as you're ready, release all control of your breath. Relax and allow your awareness to open into observation of the breath. And taking some time now to explore what it's like to soften inside. Softening from the inside, the muscles around your eyes. Feel your forehead smooth. Imagine that you could let all the muscles of your face relax or soften right now. Relax the jaw. And could you feel the inside of your mouth and in particular, relax the tongue. Let your tongue fill your lower jaw as you soften it, and you might even sense if you could relax the root of your tongue down into your throat. Feel your arms heavy. You might imagine your arms like heavy drapes hanging from your shoulders. And just sense from the inside down through the elbows. And down through the wrists. And sensing from the inside, and feel the palms, the space inside the thumbs, the volume of your fingers, the backs of the hands. Feel the space inside your throat. And feel the space inside your lungs as your body naturally and easily breathes. Could you in any way soften or relax your lower back? And the buttocks and the floor of the pelvis? And you might bring your attention now about 3 inches below your navel and in toward the very center of your abdomen. And just hold your attention here. Feel, soften, and notice what you feel. Notice if you can feel the subtlety of the breath here, down deep in the core. And feel now the volume and the length and the weight of your legs from the hip joints to the knees. The knees to the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. And the soles of the feet and the heels. Sensing through the whole body now, is there anywhere that might soften or relax? And from this place of softening, of receptivity, you might direct your attention to an anchor of your choosing. For many, it's the breath. The breath at the nostrils or the belly, or even just the general sense of the body breathing. But you might like to explore using the sounds as an anchor, the experience of the sound vibrations. And some find it helpful to soften the palms, the fingers and thumbs, and allow the sense of aliveness here to be this anchor. And whatever anchor you choose, breath, sound, or the feeling in the palms, for this next period of time, let this be your primary point of focus, knowing that the mind is designed to generate thoughts, to anticipate, to review. But when in those moments you wake up with the mind far away, let your practice be this re-arriving, this re-relaxing and receiving, feeling from the inside your anchor. And this part of our practice is arriving again and again, and beginning again and again. And what could soften right now? And again, how intimately can you feel your anchor from the inside? If you are lost in a thought right now, could you let it go? Acknowledging what's happening and sensing if you can let go of any sense of concern for the future, any reviewing of the past. Allow yourself to deeply relax, to guide your attention again to the here and now. To this moment and this one. One aspect of this practice is noticing what's happening as it's happening. As I breathe in, I'm aware of breathing in. As I breathe out, I'm aware of breathing out. Being aware of sound vibrations. Being aware of the felt sense of aliveness inside. Another quality which naturally develops from this practice is not only being aware of what's happening as it's happening, but being aware of your relationship to what is happening. Noticing the attitude in the mind, the subtlety of the mind moving for or against whatever's here, and a heightened perception of what is changing. And you may find it helpful, if it feels right for you, to widen your attention beyond your anchor, noting 360 degrees, everything that is changing, relaxed and awake to the flow of things, sensing what it means to let things be. And as you continue, when the mind is lost in thought, you begin again. Relax, soften, and use your anchor as a way of gathering and arriving. And then again, broaden, widen, awake to all that is, open and spacious. And what is happening right now? Is it possible to let this be? In this remaining 5 minutes or so, you might refresh your practice. Could you relax and soften again the tongue, the lips, and the jaw? Softening and sensing from the inside, the palms, the soles of the feet and the heels. And over the next 3 breaths, how intimately can you feel your anchor from the inside? And can you sense this quality of the observer? This quality of non-judging, non-comparing, non-preferential awareness. Just relaxed and alert and awake. You might broaden your awareness, opening to this field of change. Deeply relaxed, at the same time alert. Open and allowing. And letting any sense of doing now fall away. Let the anchor drop away. Any sense of control. And you might take this time to explore what it means to rest in presence. And you might explore the following question. Is there anything right now in the body or mind that could soften or relax or let go? And is there anything right now that could relax or soften or let go even more than that? You might gently now turn your attention to your breath. Just notice where you feel the breath on the inside right now. Sensing both this sense of spacious allowing and at the same time the intimate detail of breathing in, breathing out. And with your eyes closed, you might let your head move a little bit to the left and right. From here, let your body begin to move and stretch in any way that feels good for you. Taking this time for your transition. There's no hurry, no rush. And you might like to reach your arms up overhead. Stretch up to the left side, the right side. Lift your chin up toward the ceiling. Let out any sounds. Welcome. I am delighted to have this time with you, and I am really delighted to have time with a very special person. And I have to say up front, this is a unique topic. This is one you will not find in many or maybe even any Dharma talks. Among other things, we're going to explore sex and what it means to be awake. And I want to ask Rachel a little bit about why that is, why this doesn't show up in the Dharma world. But first, a little bit of an introduction. Rachel Krantz is a journalist and one of the founding editors of Bustle, where she served as a senior features editor for 3 years. She's been featured on NPR, The Guardian, Vox, Vice, lots of other outlets. She's the recipient of the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award and the Investigative Reporters and Editors Radio Award, the Edward R. Murrow Award, and the Peabody Award for her work as an investigative reporter with Wire Media. And we're here to talk about her book. And the book is entitled Open, an uncensored memoir of love, liberation, and non-monogamy. It's a fascinating topic. It's one I just found personally really interesting. And just a little bit of a blurb on this that I ran across that you might find helpful and kind of a context for our conversation. This was written up as an unprecedented exploration of non-monogamy, an award-winning journalist chronicling her first open relationship with unflinching candor as she explores this fast-growing movement. I know Rachel is someone who is deeply dedicated to waking up. I know her through the Dharma world, and I know that she's so committed to challenging the edges of what holds her back from truth, and it really comes through in this book. So, Rachel, welcome.
Thank you so much.
This conversation with you.
Me too. I feel like my goal is to try to stay embodied in this conversation and just savor it and enjoy it because I don't know, I've been waiting a long time to be able to have an opportunity to talk about some of these ideas, and you've been such an important advisor for me throughout this process. I think the first time we met, I was just even considering, should I write a book at all? And so it feels really special to be on the other side of this, having the conversation again.
Well, I'm so happy to have this conversation again. Because so much, I know how much you've gone through in writing this journal. When they say it's with it's candor, you really are incredible transparency through this process. So I see that you're starting to kind of do the circuit as your book is coming out in January. And so I've watched some of the interviews, and I've noticed that everyone has a unique angle. Someone is like, oh, let's talk about the sex part. And then others are like, well, let's talk about the writing part. And I'm really curious about the waking up part, because I know that's certainly near and dear to me, but I know that's so close in and so much of a driver for you. So I guess I have two questions to kind of start off with. One's sort of like a definition. When you say in the subtitle non-monogamy, what exactly is non-monogamy? And also, if you can kind of give us a thumbnail of what called you to the topic and a little bit about your experience.
Sure, thank you. So non-monogamy is anything but monogamy, right? And there's a wide spectrum of how people practice it. You might have couples who only have experiences together. You might have relationships where only one person has experiences outside the relationship, another person is monogamous. Then, all the way on the other end is polyamory, where maybe there's multiple partners, that there's avoidance of hierarchy. So there's lots of different ways that people practice. And in the book, I sort of get into all of them. I started on the journey because I met someone in 2015 who I was very interested in. I had a pattern of serial monogamy. And he told me that he believed in non-monogamy. And I saw someone who was older than me, had more experience, and decided to try and explore it because I was very curious about what other ways there are of loving and being in relationship, and had also, been drawn to Buddhist thought since my early 20s, and already was kind of making those links in my mind of feeling like, well, wouldn't this be a less attached way to be in relationship? And once I started confronting jealousy, that also became very intense but interesting to me as a sort of spiritual exploration.
So there's something in here that was inherently attractive around the idea of exploring attachment
Yeah,
and how to be in relationship without attachment.
right.
Wow,
But I
that's a
think
challenge.
as I explore in the book, I was a little confused on what that meant. And so a lot of, writing the book was going back to teachers like you, and other Buddhist teachers are throughout the book to try to really untangle some of these themes, because part of what you see is how sometimes they can be misapplied or even wielded as a form of control in relationship.
So what really interests me here is, I think the thing that you and I truly have in common in our life experience is that we're taking what's here and really examining it for like what's real, because I think of the best definition of vipassana is cultivating penetrating insights into the nature of reality. So, and I so admire how you just moved in that world so unflinching and really exploring, with real transparency, all that came up. But what's different in our approach is we had very much of a kind of a polarity, because I stumbled into an ashram which happened to have a very, very traditional and conservative approach to sexuality and relationships, which was basically kind of informed through Samkhya philosophy, which basically says if you're not in a relationship, you'll never have relationship problems.
Right.
If you don't have a car, you'll never have car problems. So the whole thing is don't go there. But also, and because I did have a formal celibacy vow for about 6.5 years, so much of the training was this energy just wants to go down and out. So what you need to do is move it up and in, and it's like, riding an elevator. And it was a fascinating journey, but it was a journey of restraint for me, which was full of all kinds of drama and insights, and then attachments to the states that kind of come with it, and so forth. And then I remember running across Rajneesh, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who said, the only way to move beyond the senses is through the senses. It's only through your experience that you can really begin to see into the light of awareness. So when you kind of contrast that, how would you kind of chronicle like the awakening the awakening of awareness and the awakening of loving awareness?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say for me, it felt like I needed to make myself uncomfortable and kind of go as deep as possible, to see that it was too much. That was kind of my trajectory and journey. I think I had the romantic idea as an artist, as a young person, that I just want to feel all the feelings. And the part of a lot of things that didn't appeal to me in Buddhist thought as much was this idea of kind of avoid suffering, because I thought, well, I've always learned from suffering so much, and I never would take back my suffering. And I want the highs, so I'll take the lows, And so I think this journey was a really intense exploration of like, let me see how high I can take the highs and how low I can take the lows. But I think through that, I learned a lot about the value of equanimity, sobriety, periods of deliberate celibacy. But for me, I kind of needed to explore the hedonistic side of things very fully to sort of know why pushing experience to the limit was maybe not the most sustainable or wise path. I kind of had to watch myself deteriorate slowly under that framework of kind of living at a breakneck pace.
Well, what I admire is, you're trained and you're experienced as an investigative journalist. So I would imagine there's a very deep curiosity that's kind of informing kind of the world you are exploring. And then
Yes.
plus, in the inner practice, we have this cultivation of the witness, the capacity to observe without preference, and observe without judgment. What supported you? Like, how did you sustain awareness and sort of sustain presence through all of your explorations?
Well, I think first of all, I often didn't. I think a lot of the stories about how as I fall deeper into unhealthy relationship patterns that I was looking to weed as a way to sort of drop myself into a state of immediate presence and mindfulness without doing the work of meditating. And so a lot of the story is kind of, as I come out of that, you see the contrast with going through a period of sobriety and really deepening my meditation practice and what is the difference there. But I think that at that point in my life, I was trying, I was trying to learn how to be with some incredibly difficult feelings, but I didn't have the discipline around my practice yet, but I was kind of grasping it whatever I could. I think the idea of having this book as a potential light at the end of the tunnel became a coping mechanism and a way that I trained myself to be the observer. And it was necessary because the relationship the book describes eventually became characterized by a lot of gaslighting. So by the end of it, or even the middle of it, I now trusted someone else's thoughts and mind more than my own, and had someone else's voice in my head, which was something that had never happened to me before. And I began to mistrust any judgment of reality, really, because he was always telling me, no, you're misinterpreting reality or you're remembering that wrong. And so I think the idea of this imaginary book was my way, even as I was falling deeper and deeper into that unhealthy dynamic of imagining that someday I would come out on the other side, that this would be for a larger purpose, that I was on some sort of hero's journey. And, quite literally, I began recording things to try to have some sense of solid reality at the same time as I was increasingly questioning whether there is such a thing as reality, solid, that's, in any way solid.
I think the metaphor of the hero's journey is really apt, because it's something you were just consciously called to. And of course, part of the hero's journey is being lost and finding yourself, again and again. It sounds like the book, really was kind of a refuge, for you to kind of come back to a place of gathering and presence and inquiring what really is true.
Yes.
What would you say, so again, but back to this metaphor of the hero's journey, what were the biggest wins that knocked you off course?
Well, I would say the first one was definitely jealousy, which you've done a whole episode on that I think I've listened to a couple of times, and is an incredibly informative teacher. And I never thought of myself as a jealous person. Like it wasn't an emotion I was particularly familiar with, anxiety, sure, but jealousy, which encompasses anxiety, but so many other things, it's really more like 8 emotions wrapped into one word, was an intense wind that blew me off course and really humbled me because if you really want to challenge your ego, your childhood wounds and attachments, watch your partner go be with other people, over and over again. And there's a constant shift in what feels dependable that is very challenging, that's very instructive because it's this lesson in impermanence, right? You watch the jealousy come and crest and leave. You watch, things with your partner and their relationships change, and you're not certain what's coming next. And you have to learn to try to be okay with all that uncertainty. But of course, it's incredibly uncomfortable in a lot of moments. So that was the main thing. Then the other thing was, all the gaslighting and gradually kind of being in this new paradigm where someone was telling me that my perceptions and emotions were not valid, and actually, giving me teeth not hun to sort of say why that was, why I should be able to control any feelings that I'm feeling through mindfulness, which I later learned is not a totally uncommon thing. Like actually, Joyce Maynard has a memoir about her relationship when she was very young with an older J.D. Salinger. And he was into Zen thought as well. And it was a kind of similar dynamic where he gave her, Buddhist texts to read. And it was very much framed as, if you're uncomfortable, like this is part of your journey and you just need to overcome it. And it was very confusing, right? Because a part of me agreed for sure and still does. It was a part of my journey. I wouldn't take back any of it. I did need to be uncomfortable. But something about the way it was being framed and the discrediting of feelings, there was no distinction, like I've heard you and Tara talk about, of real but not true. It was because he deemed my jealousy, not true or not based in things that were valid, it shouldn't even be real. And so that's where the problem was.
Yeah. So how did you heal that? Like how did you come to a place of seeing that and holding it in truth and loving awareness, in true truth?
Well, very gradually. And then also sort of, I guess, what I call like a moment of awakening where I realized that there was, a big lie that I won't spoil that kind of shattered my perception of, the beliefs that have been planted of no one else is going to be as ethical, no one else is going to be as honest. And I saw that wasn't true. So if that wasn't true, maybe all the other things weren't true. And it led me to question that authority. Then the other thing that happened was I went on a meditation retreat that was sponsored for people working in the animal rights movement. And there's a chapter in the book about that. I met a monk named Monk Tashi Nima, and he's still one of my closest teachers and friends, and really began to untangle some of the concepts. And, asked him, we had one-on-one session and asked him lots of questions about, okay, if you can control your emotions through mindfulness, then shouldn't I be able to control anything I'm feeling and just kind of deal with the jealousy better and the anxiety better? And he really made the distinction of, okay, when an emotion is yours, it is your responsibility. But if someone is misbehaving and you're enabling it, not only are you not helping them, but you're also making your situation much more difficult than it needs to be, right? You're setting yourself up for suffering, and you're not doing them any favors, because they're just creating all this bad karma, right? And probably suffering for other people. It's kind of, idiot compassion, basically. And so he helped me make that distinction of like, okay, yes, I can examine my thoughts and feelings as not necessarily the truth with the capital T, but the difference is that someone else shouldn't be telling me what's in my thoughts and feelings. And if they are, that's misbehaving. And, he said non-attachment is not indifference. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter to you whether you eat poison or healthy food that you associate with harmful people indiscriminately. Non-attachment actually helps you accept impermanence and move on from a relationship if it's not well suited to you. So that really helped me begin to deconstruct that. And then beyond that, afterwards, I really went into the cave, I guess, into this period of intense solitude and introspection and silence, began having a regular practice, and discovered Tara, really. And I just worked my way through all her podcast archives, and it was such a perfect antidote to so much of the confusion I had around the suffering, and also the way I'd been so associated for several years with the archetypal masculine as being more valid, more evolved, more logical, quote unquote. And here was Tara with all this incredibly feeling, feminine wisdom that I think helped me value those own sides of myself again. And then, the book ends before I discovered your podcast, but then that came several months later and was also an incredibly important part of my healing, going through a similar trajectory of listening to you as a way to, I think, have some healing with the more masculine energies as well, and to see like different paths forward of what that might look like, and sort of integrate both within myself.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm really struck by the introversion out, extroversion split. Like we're called to extroversion because it's so stimulating, and we grow and we learn so much. And then when that's out of balance, then we get depleted and we get fractured and we lose ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're called back to the cave. And then too much cave time leads to its own form of delusion.
Mm-hmm.
So when you sort of responded to that call to go back into the cave, what was it like for you to kind of like reemerge into the whole inquiry around relationship again?
You mean as I was in the cave solitude? I think one thing was beginning to practice rain and really like feel and sit with my feelings without drugs to help me, without the comfort of other bodies to help me. I had a good, I guess 6-month period of celibacy, which for me was as long as I'd had in a while. And by the time I broke it, it felt right. Like it was a conscious decision. It wasn't one made out of loneliness. And so I think going through that period of solitude helped me reframe the sort of fairy tale that I had been buying into for the last several years of this man has come and rescued me, this sort of dominant archetypal man. And like, now I know I've arrived at my adult life. And when that imploded, it was like, wow, I sort of knew all along that was an incorrect fairy tale, but I had let myself lean into it and see like, maybe not, maybe I get to be one of the people it works for, because parts of that really did feel good. And it really did feel good to be sometimes in this sort of very gendered, dynamic where the man was more dominant and I was more submissive, and I just kind of had someone else telling me what to do. And that was a big relief after always kind of feeling like an adult from a very young age. But I think once that imploded, I sensed more expansive possibilities, and I had to think, okay, maybe I'm the only person who can really promise to always take care of me. And is there a way I can write a different sort of ongoing happy ending for myself? What would that even look like? Because I'd shifted so many of these constructs over these many years of, okay, you don't have to have this traditional kind of relationship. You don't have to get married. You don't have to have kids. That I was kind of left in this place of, I don't want to throw that all out and say, oh, that didn't work, because that part of it felt very true. But I sort of had this point of just needing to really sit with and examine what might it look for me in the future to be in authentic relationships and live an authentic life. What do I want to take from this experience, and what do I want to leave behind?
Wow. Wow. You know, from my own experience of like consciously stepping back, my own period of celibacy was, you know, was such a time of just seeing on display, you know, all of the conditioning, you know, all of the
Mhm.
posturing around relationship and um, and the fantasy and all that stuff. And at the same time, you know, living in a spiritual community, you know, also being like pounded, you know, like, you really think someone's going to make you happy? You really think that? But and then to actually to make the decision to move back into relationship and sensuality and all that, like, I'm just curious, when you contrast what it was like to sort of be in like before, and then when you re-engaged after that time of really stepping back and immersing yourself in practice, what was that like?
I think the contrast was I had much clearer sense of my boundaries, which surprised me pleasantly. I felt like throughout that whole other journey, I was very confused by how I'd even go about figuring out what my boundaries were. And after that real period of introspection and meditating, and also having had my boundaries so constantly violated, I felt like I emerged with a lot more self respect, and just kind of a reflexive, instinctual sense, more trust in my own instincts of boundaries. I think I also found, unsurprisingly, that I was able to engage with more self respect, with less of a sense of like need or demand from the other person, that our relationship fit into a certain box or that they complete me. And so, of course, that's attractive to people. So I sort of knew that already, but it was interesting to see that play out of like, when you don't really need someone to complete you, you start having more people who you would want to be interested in you, attracted to you, because they likely don't need to feel like they're completing someone or like they need to be completed, and it's also just, nice to be with someone who believes in themselves or is confident in that way.
Yeah. You know what? You know, I'm struck again back to the hero's journey, you know, of like really being called to really, you know, explore and investigate, and that sense of like losing oneself and finding oneself. You know, it just brings me back to that whole practice of remembering. You know, the word sati in mindfulness means to remember, which is really core. What would you say? Like, what were some of the practices or like the tips that you found helpful that you weave into the book?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I really try to do this throughout. It's sort of a lot of slipping in the Dharma in these more secular ways that I hope will reach an audience that wouldn't seek it out generally, or maybe a younger audience. So, of course, you see the transition of before meditation practice and after. That's pretty clear. Of rain, I explain in the book. I also found the practice of keeping a gratitude journal incredibly useful. I've been doing 5 good things a night for several years now, and really try to, cite the studies that have been done on that even and show how it benefited me.
A little
There's,
bit, can I just interject?
yeah, sure.
The gratitude practice, like how does that help?
Well, I think it retrains your mind to be on the lookout for the good, right? And I think you've talked about a lot how you tried to do it without repeating anything. And so you started going to just like body parts that didn't hurt. And I relate to that a lot because I find there's always so much to be grateful for, that like what's not breaking down on any given day is just amazing. And so when you do have a harder day, when you just have a practice of looking at all the things that aren't going wrong, that are always beautiful, it's very useful. I think it also, especially having done this over several years, and I keep it in a 5-year journal, which is basically I can see on the same day, the year before, what were my 5 good things. You start to notice certain patterns and can arrange your life accordingly. So, certainly sometimes it was professional accomplishments, maybe of, I'm sure this will go on my 5 good things or whatever, but really it was much more. What's fun about that is the connection, right? The ability to have conversations that matter. Almost every day I would have, anytime I go outside, it would be mostly things I saw on my walk. So when I would have reclusive tendencies, especially once I started writing the book and was so absorbed in that, and it was so easy to sometimes not want to take a break to go outside, that I would know, no, as much as I love writing or as much as it's cold outside, like the bird in the tree is always part of my 5 good things. And I also started integrating other practices to help cultivate more of that. So for example, outside my desk, there's a tree, and I started having a practice that every time a bird would land on it, that would be my cue to pause. And I would just sit and appreciate the bird until the bird flew away, which would usually be like 10 seconds, right? But just having that practice added so much more pausing and savoring and gratitude to my life. So yeah, I've found it instructive on so many levels.
Wow. Yeah. Looking for the good and then the cumulative. And it's so interesting of how much of the things that sort of enlivened you and touched you had to do with nature and had to do with authentic connection.
Yeah. And I think that's what, I'm always striving for, what most of us are striving for, is just to like feel it rest in the present moment. And it's, wow, everything is about all these elaborate schemes we devise to make ourselves feel safe while we're doing that, or to be like, oh, if I, write this best-selling book, like then I'll be able to arrive and really feel like at peace in the present moment. And yeah, I have, continuing off your last question, in the book also, Tara's teaching of, and what would that give you? And what would that give you? I really kind of go through that of, in this case, that I had this desire in the beginning of the story for someone to rescue me. And when you keep asking that question, it just keeps coming back eventually to the same thing of like, because then I would feel relaxed. And if I felt relaxed and like I'd arrived at my life correctly, then I would just be able to rest in presence. And so the idea of, what about you just try on doing that right now and not believing it's something in the future? And obviously that's a practice that I expect to be always working on, that I'm still very much, not where I want to be at yet with. And I'm trying to just be as patient and gentle as I can be on that path. Cause I think I'm still where I'm at right now is like, I have so much more mindfulness than I used to, but I'm also not far along enough in my path or practice that I'm able to relax in the present moment or not live in the future to the degree I want to. So it can be frustrating because I can see with more clarity than ever before where I'm stuck, where the repeated patterns that don't serve me and stories that don't serve me are, and I'm able to pause and take myself out of it. But I'm also, I don't get caught in the same way, but I'm noticing how constant it is regardless. So I'm at that point, I would say.
So I think, part of the hero's journey is, the call, resisting the call, following the call, being beset by every possible obstacle. And then there's coming home, and it sounds like even though there's still, as we always say in the meditation world, you feel better, you feel your sadness better, your resistance better, your anger better. But nonetheless, it sounds like it really has been a homecoming, to yourself. When you sort of like come around to the original calling to explore like relationship and sort of like getting out of the box of concepts around relationship and really being awake and present to the world, how do you hold it now?
Well, I think that I judge my own desires less. I also try to, where I can, invest less, I don't know, importance in them in any fixed way, or not be purely driven by pleasure seeking or praise seeking. Of course, that's an ongoing journey. But yeah, I think a lot of things that in the beginning I used to have a lot of shame over, why is it so difficult for me to imagine being only with one person for the rest of my life? Why, why do I feel like maybe I wouldn't want to always live with someone when everyone's saying that's another way to know you've arrived at your life? I think I'm just a lot more questioning of there's different ways to be committed and in relationship, and that relationships can be fluid and go through different phases. My partner now, we've been living together since the pandemic started. We weren't before. And it's very possible that in the future, we might go through periods of not living together again without having to break up or anything like that. And so I think I'm a lot less likely to feel like I have to adhere to someone else's script of what, and this sort of relationship escalator mentality of like, this is the order you do things in, and then you've arrived, and then you fall off a cliff and die. It's just like, how about we each do what most serves our waking up and feeling free. So I think I'm less judgmental.
And I'm really curious. It seems like sexuality and relationship is sort of like a generational thing. I know David Data, who teaches a lot around the Tantra relationship, talks about the 1950s relationship where it was, I'll kill myself providing for the family, and I'll do whatever you tell me, just don't leave me. And now how that evolved into like the 50-50 relationship, which is like we're equal, but then there's no charge, you're just living with your roommate, and really pointing toward this whole piece around like really identifying like your sexual essence and really being true to yourself. And it seems like this, like this current generation or the generation after me has even more of like a free and open sense of how to live and how to be in relationship. And I guess for someone, let's say your age, um, who's really kind of really exploring how do I be in relationship in these days, in this age, what would your advice be, in terms of like how to move into this relationship, into the whole idea of relationship in this very, very open dynamic and open possibilities? What counsel would you offer?
Well, I think one is to seek out mentors and teachers and advice from other people who've walked different paths. Another one would be to establish a regular practice, because it's going to be, if you step outside of the monogamy paradigm, it's going to be challenging no matter what happens. Monogamy is challenging too, for sure, in other ways, but it can be lonely if you don't have community around you. So just like anything else, it's important to have some community so that you don't end up, on an island by yourself or with just one other partner, where it can sometimes be harder to know if what is happening is healthy or not without that outside feedback or therapy or whatever else. So enlist help, I would say. I also feel like part of why meditation helps so much is that, well, of course, it helps you be less reactive, to examine your thoughts and beliefs as not necessarily these fixed things that are true. And also to appreciate, impermanence and fluidity. And so I feel very agnostic, I guess, about my relationships or my sexuality now. Like I don't feel, or I feel like I'm still trying to decondition this long held belief that I'm going to reach some point and then I'll be liberated, or then I'll be awakened, or then I'll be having, the best person ever to complete me, the soulmate. I feel like that's something I'm still working to let go of. But what I do feel like I have much more clearly now, and that maybe I would encourage other people to embrace or examine and explore, is just that there might be a lot more fluidity to their desires than they think. And if they just want to open themselves, that they shouldn't feel like they have to attach a label to it, or that it has to be some fixed identity, because it doesn't. You can use a label if you feel like that's useful to you, but it could also just be you want to explore.
Wow. So yeah, just to reflect some of that back, so there's something here about finding others who walk the path, who can be mentors and be advisors. There's something about the practice itself as a way of just coming back to yourself, really kind of connecting with source. And there's something here about community, about being with like-minded people.
Mhm.
And there's something here about giving yourself permission to let go of labels, because, and I love that, because it's very much like when we have that sense of like grounding ourselves in the present moment, then that actually gives us permission to explore the boundarylessness of our true nature, which can
Mhm.
definitely be part of our sexuality and how we relate to others.
Definitely.
Wow, way cool. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank
I
you.
just have to say your book was so powerful. Again, part of it was just the incredible transparency that you offered. But also, I just know that it's going to be helpful for so many people who really exploring these very, very deep core issues around. It's one thing to ask, who am I? It's another to ask, who am I in relationship with the world? And I
Mhm.
just think it's going to be so, so helpful. And I just wish you so well as you bring this forward. I'll put in the show notes all the information. But again, the book is Open and Uncensored Memoir of Love, Liberation, and Non-Monogamy.
Oh,
Really
thank you
great.
so much. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about this, and being open to having a conversation around this topic, because I know that it can be more controversial, and um, it really, it just means a lot to me to feel recognized as helpful in your eyes. So thank you.
Tara and I were talking the other day. We were like, how come there are no Dharma talks on sex? And in many ways, the positive tradition kind of comes out of like the dried up monk tradition. And I think that's why I think this is so, so powerful and so potent. And it's going to be helpful to a lot of practitioners, I think.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.